Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Monkey Patching Podcast, where we go bananas about all things context hacking, synthetic music generation, and more. My name is M. Rillo, and I'm joined by B. Art, as always.
Hi,
You didn't think I was going to read that, did you? How are you doing, Bart?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. It's very warm where I'm sitting at the moment, but for the rest, I'm doing good.
Yes, we're also recording virtually again, as
Yeah,
exceptionally, but we'll get there. Very warm, I think, in Europe these days, no? Like there's a heat wave across Europe and stuff. We're talking ACs and all these things before, the good stuff, but off we go. What do we have for today, Bart?
we have a lot actually. We had a lot of news items for the last week. We had to cut in them a little bit, and we ended up with 8. Let's start there.
Let's
Uh,
start.
so Paul Schmid. Paul Schmid is a tech lead at Hugging Face. He argues that the real differentiator in modern AI work is context engineering, the discipline of assembling the right information, tools, and format around an LLM rather than obsessing over single string prompts. So he's basically arguing that the next phase that we're now entering is that we are moving away from focusing a lot on prompt engineering, but instead of moving from prompt engineering to context engineering, which basically means like trying to give all the necessary context to an LLM to, let's say, in a plausible way, be able to do your job.
Yeah.
And context means a lot of things, like the prompt, your system prompt is part of your context, but you also have like things like short-term memory. You have potentially a rack system. You have user prompts. You have tools that you have available. Like could be like your LM can execute commands, or it can visit websites, or it can interact with an API. Potentially, if you have some form of long-term memory, and so like all these things combined is the context that you provide to your LLM. And I think the point that he's making, like for people that have been following this field closely, is basically a lot of the advances that we're seeing in better performance are coming from these things, right? Like having smarter tools available, having some history, making it very easy to retrieve information, potentially via tools or via other possibilities. What do you think, Marilla, of this
I
move?
I mean, I agree. I think, well, so maybe to put in context with like prompt engineering. Prompt engineering is just like the stuff you write before your query, right? So it's actually a subset here when you see user prompt.
Mm-hmm.
I also think it's a bit, I was thinking, as you're saying, available tools is part of the context. But and then in MCP, right, the model context protocol, it kind of boils down to tools, right? Like in the actual MCP, but indeed context. And I know if you read the Anthropic MCP, like the model context protocol, they also talk like how you could share prompts and all these things.
Yeah.
But I agree. I think also, especially when you start saying we have like multiple agents, right? You have like one agent that does this, one agent that does that. It's like how much context, how many tools, how many, what do you exactly want to include in that agent so you can perform the task well? Because we also see that if you add too much stuff, you just throw everything you have at a model, sometimes you can get lost, quote unquote, right? Like it kind of diverges
Get
to one
overwhelmed.
thing.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's also a bit about like just giving enough information so it can do the job that you want it to do, and not just throw everything there, because we
Mm.
also see that the result, and Receive also developed even in the model. I think we talked about how Claude 4, it's better managing context. So even if you have the whole repo available, it will be a bit better to find out this and that. So, but I do think this is where we are today when you talk about agents, when you talk about all these multi agents, really. And I think this is more exciting because I remember I was very not excited about prompt engineering, but I think context engineering sounds more exciting to me. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's also a little bit different way to, I think about this task. Like to me, like prompt engineering is a bit like you have this string, you need to optimize it, and you need to run your let's say A/B test against it. From the moment that you talk about context in this wider range with tools, like you're really thinking a bit about like what is the architecture of your agent, like what is the ecosystem it lives in, that does it have access to, and I think it
Yeah.
also force you to have a bit that point of view that it's more of a system that you're building and not necessarily just a system prompt that
Yeah.
preloads what you want to do.
Yeah, I feel like it's almost like you had that before it was the Gen AI or LLMs, and now it's more the agentic. And when you think more agentic, you are thinking more of context managing, like what kind of tools
Yeah.
does he have? How does one thing interact with the other? Which is pretty cool. Maybe we can jump a bit ahead because there's an article that I added that links very much to this, which is from Walden Yan. And Walden Yan contends that multi-agent LLM architectures are fragile and that reliability comes from a single agent armed with rich shared context. Key advice, and I quote, share context and share full agent traces, not just individual messages. So again, I'm curious a bit how you tackle. Also agents is something that I feel like, to be honest, I hear a lot of noise about it, but I don't know how many people are actually building these multi-agent systems. But
So what you're saying is maybe to go a bit deeper into the article that you're sharing
yeah,
now, like you're saying that he's advising against building multi-agents.
he's not necessarily. It's a bit more nuanced than this. He's
Yeah.
not necessarily advising against.
Maybe before we should explain a little bit like what are multi-agents.
Yes. So agents, I think the easiest, the simplest way that I can frame is like a LLM that can make tool calls. So basically, an LLM that can actually make API calls, that has functions. So for example, if you have a database or like if you have your calendar, right? An LLM by nature doesn't have access to your calendar, but you can actually give tools to say, hey, be able to read my calendar and see who participated in this. And then whenever you ask questions to the LLM can actually call that function with the right arguments, right? And that's, in my eyes, that's kind of LLM becomes an agent, right? Be able to choose what to call and this and this. Now, multi-agents is basically a system where you have a whole bunch of those. So you have different entities, different Gen AI entities that have different tools, and then they kind of need to cooperate, right? And there are many ways that you can set, like you can have one orchestrator or master node, let's say, with a whole bunch of routing stuff. So there are many different ways. What this guy is saying, he says, don't build multi-agents because, well, according to him, there's a lot of errors that can come up with this. But it's a bit more nuanced than this. Before he goes in, he also talks about context engineering. So that's why I also thought of the article we previously talked to. Yeah. At the core of reliability is context engineering. And then he describes a bit. He also says, so he gives a few examples, right? Like this is so I'm sharing on the screen for people that are just listening, but basically you have like an agent that breaks down a task and then it kind of delegates to two subtasks, to two sub agents, and then you have a final agent that combines the results. But then he kind of argues that these things doesn't work well because if you just pass the whole context, then a lot of times it gets overwhelmed, like we said. Sometimes it does redundant work. Sometimes the two sub agents, they understand things differently, so it doesn't work. And then it kind of says, okay, give the context as it goes through and then try to combine, but then that's also not great. And then in the end, he kind of gets to, well, I'm jumping a bit ahead, but he kind of gets to a linear sequence of things, right? So you have, instead of having two things running in parallel, you wait for the first agent to do the first subtask, and then you delegate to the second agent to do the second subtask. And the idea there is because you can really like pass the context a bit. But again, because it can get overwhelmed or you can have a context overflow, he even suggests, and this is for longer tasks, something that is very, very mature, he suggests actually having a context manager kind of thing, like he calls it context compression LLM, which basically we'll see from this first conversation what actually needs to be passed down to the second one, what needs to be passed down to the third one, etc., etc. So again, to be honest, I'm not sure how many people do this. I'm not sure how many people have these issues. I think there's very narrow slice of people that are actually building agentic systems. I think a lot of things need to come in place for you to actually really get knee deep in this. But one thing that he suggested here, for example, Claude Code, and we talked a bit about Claude Code. He gives us an example of a multi-agentic system because it spawns subtasks. But he says that even on this case, they don't run in parallel. It's actually like Claude delegates something and then it waits for the result and then it comes back and then it sends something else, which kind of support this idea that like having many things running parallel doesn't work well. And I wanted to ask you as well, Bart, have you played with like building multi-agentic systems or agentic systems and all these things?
Well, I've definitely built agentic systems. I've played with multi-agentic systems, and this is very anecdotal, but I found it to be very hard to get robust results back, which is
Yeah,
basically what the article is saying as well, right?
yeah, exactly.
I think it makes sense, at least as of now, that you build an agent that is just very good at a specific thing. Focus on that, and then potentially you can use that as a tool for another agent, but then you position it as a tool and not necessarily as a multi-agent system. But if you start passing a lot of content from agent to agent to agent, knowing that even at a single agent level, you already introduce a lot of noise, there can be hallucination, it's not perfect, like you need guardrails, like it amplifies so much from the moment that you add this in a sequence, this
Yeah,
noise. And it's very
yeah,
hard at this point to in a robust way safeguard that this noise does not start doing things that should not happen.
yeah,
And
indeed.
and I think maybe, and it also comes a bit from playing it on the monitoring side of this, like I think we also still, to some extent, and there are a lot of initiatives on this, and there are a lot of startups that are focusing on this, but we still lack a bit I feel like the monitoring primitives, even for single agent systems, to really have a good view of what is going on and why is this failing, why is this not working, let alone that we have the monitoring primitives for multi-agent systems at this point.
Yeah, that's true. I think, yeah, the vibe that I get is like this thing is super powerful, but to get it to do what you want is also very tricky. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, we even talk like we have reasoning models. The reasoning models can overthink certain tasks as well. So it's like I feel like we're still figuring out a lot of these things there, right? But cool. I mean, actually, I would really like to touch more. Maybe a quick question, if you're allowed to share. What was the thing that you were playing with it? What was your toy multi-agent system use case?
In this case, the last time I touched upon it, I actually told you the other day, is I have this family support bot that is basically a Telegram bot that does a lot of things. And I tried a multi-agent approach there a few weeks ago, but I moved away, and it's basically a simple agent, single agent with access to right tools,
And then
which worked way better.
the tools could be other agents. Like the tools could also be agent AI powered,
Tools
or
could be our relationship. I think that would be. It's easier to build it in a robust way like that, instead of
yeah,
really like making another agent dependent in your graph, basically.
yeah. I think so too. Yeah, that's when all these things get a bit murky, right? Because the MCP is supposed to be for tools, and then Google came out with the agent-to-agent protocol, which you could use MCP for like agent communicate with other agents, right? But yeah,
Mhm.
it's a bit there. Maybe for the next one, since I talked about MCP.
MCP specification adds sampling, letting servers request LLM completions through the client so agents can delegate generation securely without provisioning their own models. I quote, sampling is a powerful MCP feature that allows servers to request LLM completions through the client, enabling sophisticated agentic behaviors while maintaining security and privacy.
Yes. So have you heard of MCP sampling actually?
I've heard about it. I have not seen it in practice yet, but I think also you shared this in the context of an IDE that is now supporting it, or
Yes, and not an IDE, a framework, a library, but I'll touch a bit. So before that, MCP sampling is the idea. So it's not like I saw this from this LinkedIn post, which I'll share in a bit. But then when I looked it up, actually, that was it already exists, indeed. So from what I understood, MCP sampling is the idea that you have a tool, um, like an MCP tool, and the tool can actually needs LLM power to do its job. But then instead of actually that tool be having to provision its own LLM and maybe you have to manage API keys and maybe you have to do all these things, you can actually go back to the original caller, which is an LLM, and use the LLM power of that thing. So I thought it was, I mean, again,
yeah, that it's It's a bit difficult to understand. Like maybe just one step back for people that are new to MCP. So MCP is a protocol that allows clients and servers to easily communicate. The example of a client is, for example, if you've installed ChatGPT on your desktop, or you have ChatGPT on your mobile phone, or you have Claude desktop. Like that is a very intuitive example of a client. A server, like Marilo was saying, is like often like a tool, like something that is built specifically for a task, and your client, let's say Claude desktop, can interact with that to do something. So maybe you have a tool that is very good at summarizing articles in a certain manner. So Claude desktop can send the text of the article to that tool, to that MCP server. It will, by default, how it used to work is that this has its own call to an LLM to then summarize it, and it sends it back. And what sampling basically does is it allows your client, your, let's say, Claude desktop, to send the article, but also give the instructions. If you need to use an LLM, use me for it. And that's basically what sampling does. So it allows tools to not have to bring their own LLM model, but basically use the LLM model that's available to the client.
Exactly. It's already there, right?
Which I think is very important for corporate uptake and the uptake of this in enterprises. Because what you typically see, so I think as a user, we typically don't really care, maybe aside from the cost, because we just want, if we talk about, I have this MCP server that is very good at article summarization, we just care typically about that it's very good at article summarization, right?
True.
But in an enterprise setting, what you want is that, okay, you typically have this LLM model hosted somewhere, maybe in an Azure isolated environment, and you enforce the whole company. If someone needs an LLM, you need to go via this pathway,
Yeah.
which typically today with MCPs is very hard because tools all bring their own LLM. But this really allows to unify which LLM you use for tools.
Yeah.
Which today is not established, right? Like we're not there yet, but the protocol very early on, I think from the very first version, I've always known it to be there, supported it. But you brought this, Mailer, because there is also now some news on new support,
Indeed.
right?
Yes. So I this is from Samuel Coven, I think is his name, or that's how he pronounces his name. He's the guy from Pydantic and Pydantic AI. And basically in version 0.3.2 of Pydantic AI, they added MCP sampling. And then he kind of walks through a bit. He also did a talk before on what is MCP sampling. So there's actually, let me speed this up a bit. So I'm showing the LinkedIn post for people that are just listening. And he talks, so here in his talk on the AI Engineer World's Fair 2025, he also kind of does a little schematic, right? Which I think makes it easier for people that are trying to understand what is MCP sampling, right? So yeah, I mean, it does MCP sampling. He has a use case here, like on create an image, create a robot in a punk style. It should be pink. And that tool actually will send back to the original LLM to create that image, right? I haven't used as much Pydantic AI as I would like, but apparently, like the way he's showing here, like a lot of the tools are just added as MCP Server Studio here, right? And then he goes through, I mean, the link will be in the show notes. He also uses Pydantic log file, which is their logging tool, to kind of show how the LLM request goes back to the client, right? And in the end, you can see that it has an image that is not great, but still it works, right? Like not a beautiful image, but MCP sampling. Yeah, it's something. It's something. So yeah, pretty cool. I didn't know about this until I saw this post, but it's nice to see things are moving along.
Definitely, yeah. And like I said, I really believe there needs to be wider uptake of sampling to really adopt MCP in an enterprise setting. That's good news. Good news to see that Pydantic is doing it, because I do think Pydantic, like if you do have a Python background and you want to start building agents, I think Pydantic AI is a very logical place to start.
I think so too. But I'm also very curious because there's a lot of those frameworks. I'm also very curious on how, the differences, the trade-offs, and or even just going aside from, if you have OpenAI, would it be better to just use the OpenAI client, for example? Right?
True. Yeah.
So curious about these things. And am I next? Maybe then, while we're talking about OpenAI, researcher Yukin Jin teased that OpenAI will release an impressive open source model next month, stoking excitement across AI Twitter or X AI. And I quote, sorry to hype, but having a few friends at OpenAI makes it hard not to hear how wild their open source model dropping next month is.
Whoop, whoop. I was going wild.
You're going wild. So next month, huh? This was from
Yes. So that's a bit. So there is no official communication as far as I understand from OpenAI on this. But since a week or something, there has been a lot of rumors that OpenAI is coming with an quote unquote open source model, which is very interesting to see what it will do. The rumors state that it's performance-wise, it's going to be a reasoning model, and it's going to be better. That's what you hear a bit than 4.1 mini, which is very good performance.
Oh wow. Yeah, he says Meta's going to take time to catch up.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, well, one, we need to see if it really happens, right? So we don't really know. And it's also be interesting, like, what will it do to like the ecosystem? Like, will there, like, we have, of course, I think when we talk about open source models that are relevant in an application context, people often default to Llama.
Yeah.
There are a few others, but I think Llama takes 80% of this.
Yeah.
And if OpenAI comes out with a very performant model, like would it reset a bit like the competitive dynamics in that space? And then other questions also like, what is that space, or even like, or are we just raising like what is today the floor for hobbyists?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But I think it's also because there was a lot of criticism towards OpenAI because they were supposed to be open and then they were going for profit. I think this is also a bit when I hear them open sourcing models, I also remind of that story. I also remember of all that, like the whole kerfuffle, with Elon Musk making a lot of noise and filing lawsuits and all these things, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't bet on OpenAI suddenly going fully open source.
Yeah,
I think
sure.
more has something to do with competitive dynamics, maybe in the open source space, but maybe also optics overall. And that brings us maybe then immediately to the next article, because Meta has poached 4 additional OpenAI researchers, and according to parallel reporting, is debating whether to shift away from fully open source Llama models towards a more close approach. So a few things going on there. So this article has about 4 additional OpenAI researchers. I think by now in total it's 7 very high profile researchers that have been hired from OpenAI by Meta. People that have really been at the forefront of the 01, 03 models, that have also either been involved very much in the training of this or the optimization, etc. So these are very influential people in terms of the performance of OpenAI in the LLM space today. And apparently, and it's also the rumors that probably a lot of people have heard, like there's crazy amounts of money being paid for people to move, with rumors that up to 100 million.
Would you move for that money? Would you move for that kind of money, Bart?
$1 million is a lot, huh?
It's a lot, huh?
A lot, yeah.
And how long do you have to move?
Yeah, also. but apparently, like, and whether it's not actually 100 million, like it's probably a good offer. And it's successful, it's effective, right? Like they are moving. At the same point, we also hear rumors that Meta's leadership has discussed divesting from Llama. So you have a lot of these things going on at the same time, which is also an interesting one, because I think it would leave, like we were just saying, like the open source space has like 80% of it is Llama. If there will be no more support for Llama, like what does it mean for the open source community? It's a big question mark.
Yeah, indeed.
While at the same time, Meta is still very heavily investing in building this capability, right? Even if it's not Llama. It's these hires, it's the acquisitions that we've heard in the past weeks. So there's a lot going on, and I think like if they would divest from Llama, it's definitely not because they don't believe in this evolution. It's simply because Llama as an open source model, like business-wise, doesn't really make sense to them.
Yeah, but like you said, the optics, right? I think that would reflect on Meta, because they were always very, even the Meta researchers, right? They were very, we do open source, we do this, we do this. So I feel like taking this, I'm not sure how much the image of Meta would suffer, quote unquote. And like you said, like Meta takes a lot of the space. I feel like LLM research it's a bit special in the sense that when I was still in university, the universities, they would publish a lot of papers, some companies as well. But nowadays, the amount of money you need to train these models, the amount of, like, the experiments get so expensive that only like for-profit companies like Meta can actually do these things.
Mhm.
So you end up being more reliant on these companies as well. And like Meta was the biggest one, let's say, that would say, I'm doing this research for open source to advance society and all that. And if they pull out, then I think it's also not. Yeah, I'm not excited about this, let's say. I feel like we still needed someone to be able to, well, maybe like the DeepSeek, right? Maybe it's another one, but it's very hard to be very optimistic about how the field is going to evolve if there's not going to be any open source. It's just for the full. It feels very powerless, I guess. That's the vibe you get, right?
Yeah, to be honest, I never really felt like Meta is doing this for the good of society.
I think, of course, I think they had like some their reasons, right? But I think in the end, like, it did help, right? I feel like, I mean, it did help. I feel like it was a bit of a lifeline.
Yeah.
Like at least Meta is doing, like, at least that these weights are open source. At least we can try these things. At least you can take these models and
Yeah,
try
true.
to experiment a bit more on top. And like, yeah, now no more.
Well, we don't know. There's rumors about that.
We don't know. We don't know.
Rumors,
We don't
but
know.
I do still think like Meta is, especially and these hires will only help. Is still very strongly positioned as becoming one of the key players, especially because of the ecosystem that they have. Like you have now an LM in WhatsApp. You have a lot integrated in their other products and their ad space. Building ads becomes very easy. I think if they improve only a little bit in terms of performance and they can play with price, because, for example, the Meta LM is not really the best one, but it's free.
Yeah, indeed.
It's very easy for them to take market share.
Yeah, did you see also that the Meta, they're going to start using people's posts to train models or something?
Yeah. Well, they probably are, right?
Yeah, you had to send an email to request to say, I don't want to consent to my data being used, and then send an email back like, oh, we'll honor your wishes, like kind of like we'll be nice, but it's a bit more right? So yeah, I think they also have a lot of data now as well, like even like on, I mean, maybe it's not research, it's not like, but just communication, like just how people talk and all these things, different languages. So they do sit on a lot of data as well, right?
Yeah, true. I think what is also interesting about the poaching aspect of poaching research from OpenAI is that this would, well, we're in Belgium, would never have been possible in Belgium, and would never have been possible in a lot of places in the world, only in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And it's simply because San Francisco has no non-compete clauses in employment contracts. It's prohibited by San Francisco.
It has no compete clauses.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Non-compete clauses are
Non-existing.
Are non-existing. Yeah. There are some exceptions to that when it comes to sales and stuff like that, but for this, there are no non-competes.
Yeah.
Which
I heard that that's also what makes the Silicon Valley, right? Like people, they bounce so much from one company to another that like they kind of create this, they cross-pollinate within the valley. And
yeah,
then
you remove basically all the barriers for free movement of knowledge.
Yeah, indeed.
Which might hurt individual companies, but you could argue that it would benefit the economy at large.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, that's true. I don't know if I'm that against it, actually. Yeah, if you think about this, right?
It's an interesting discussion.
It's an interesting discussion indeed. And what else do we have? We have Music Creator.
Yeah. So
what is Music Creator?
Music Radar is a website, but it has an article that says that they have investigated the Velvet Sundown. It's apparently an AI-generated band with 350,000 Spotify listeners and zero real-world footprint. This illustrates how algorithmic playlists can quietly amplify synthetic artists. The profile of the band boasts the Velvet Sundown don't just play music, they conjure worlds. A line the magazine suspects was written by ChatGPT.
Nice. So this is a fake band.
Let's put it like this: they cannot find any evidence whatsoever that these people exist in the real world.
Wow. Damn. Super private or not real?
Maybe super private, yeah.
Like Amish, like like no contact with. This is the band I'm putting on the screen. This is the band.
This is the band, yeah. So this is interesting to see. Like this really makes you wonder a bit, like how will the music ecosystem evolve going forward? Like we have, it's very easy. It has become very easy for everybody to use tools like Suno. There's another big one, a music generator one. I forgot the name for a second, but it's become very easy for people to build snippets. I think if you are very deep into this space, it is possible for you to really make a synthetic artist and this person or this band, like really build an album for this, right?
So and then video clips.
So even video clips. True. Yeah. And apparently, like, I'm not sure how much time these people spend in it, but it can result in a lot of listeners. And there is some discussion on like there is, why do people do this? Apparently, there is also potentially a fraudulent point of view to this, where you create fake artists, educate bots that listen, and just you rake in the commissions for the artist, the virtual artist. I don't know that space well enough to understand whether or not it's worth the effort, because it all costs, right? And like profits from listens are minuscule, so you need to do this at a very large scale. I think the other aspect to this is that you have potentially a lot of low effort AI slop, which I don't think anyone is really excited about.
Yeah, indeed.
I think the other part to this is that you will have people that are extremely creative and that really use these tools well, and that you can potentially get good music out of this.
Yeah, and I would even call them artists as well, no? Like it's an artist that is using a different tool to create art, but
and then the discussion, of course, is like, what is music? But I agree. I agree to that, because to me, like, it's not that different to someone creating electronic music simply because you have a fake voice here, right? That is
true.
Not that far off, right?
No.
Just the electronic voice then.
And I imagine,
tools, of course, than using a sampler and stuff like this, but it's an evolution.
But I imagine when the techno music started, I feel like people were having the same discussion, right? Like, is this really music?
Probably, yeah.
Right. So
exactly. That's a good point. And I think maybe it's also like what I wonder is should we inform people? So what you, to make a parallel with image generation, what ChatGPT already does is that it includes metadata in your generated image, and then if you open it with a image viewer that supports this, it will actually show that this was AI generated. So if you open it in preview on your Mac, you will see a small information box that shows that it's AI generated.
And how easy is it to tamper with this metadata?
Well, probably easy.
Probably easy, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, you can circumvent everything, right?
Yeah.
I wonder if it makes sense on something like Spotify to also label this, or that you can just say like, this is something like electronic music. And we're not labeling electronic music aside from putting it in a genre. Maybe this should be a genre.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, indeed. Yeah, indeed. I think you would. Well, I think informing people is never better. But I also wonder, like, if people like and they listen to it, do we care? Do you care if it's a real person singing or if it's not? Like, I don't know. If it makes you,
I think maybe the only thing that I would care about is that if people consciously try to sell you something that they say is real and it's not. Maybe that's the
Yeah, that's I think the deception of it, right? Like people are trying to trick you. I think that yes, but if no one is like, if someone just kind of says like, I don't know, because there's also a place in a scenario in which people are not necessarily trying to convince you that it is a real person. They're
yeah.
not denying it either, but you're not, I don't know, it just never came to you, and then you enjoy the music, and yeah, I don't know, because
It's a bit about that authenticity, and something
yeah,
that is completely digital can be authentic as long as you know it's digital, right?
yeah,
I mean,
I agree, I agree.
but if let's say the Velvet Sundown, you have this image now on the screen with the four band members. Like if there's no notion that this is AI generated, and then there's a whole bullshit story about the guy with the
Yeah,
glasses
yeah,
and the curly hair that he lost his parents at a young age, and that is why he
yeah,
started
yeah,
playing the
yeah,
guitar, and that is how he grew up. Like, I mean, and then you realize, yeah, this is
yeah.
all fake. That's no, that's
Yeah.
it doesn't that doesn't sound authentic. That doesn't sound fair, right?
Yeah, but that's the thing. So I feel like a lot of people listen to music or they enjoy music because the things that the artists say make them feel like they relate somehow to the artist, right? Like they're suffering and like, oh yeah, I remember when I was suffering and this and this and this. But if even if, and I agree with you that if I knew that it was fake, then I would also have a bit of a harder time connecting to it. But it's kind of like movies, right? Like there are movies that are based on real facts, like on real stories, and there are movies that are completely made up, like complete fiction. But if the movie makes you feel something, does it matter? A bit of a philosophical question there, but makes you question, right?
Yeah,
Like,
true.
what's the value of things? Is it in the feeling or is it in the intention, right? I also thought it was funny, by the way, this
It's
image that we're showing here. If you see the subtitles, like, there's nothing behind those eyes. It's like
because
literally.
his parent died when he was very young.
Yeah, exactly. It's dead inside. Yeah, no, that's pretty funny. Yeah, but really cool. Really cool. And what else do we have? News from Anthropic.
Yes.
Anthropic let Claude Sonnet 3.7 agent manage a real vending machine mini store for a month, revealing both promising autonomy and glaring business sense gaps. And I quote, we let Claude manage an automated store in our office as a small business for about a month, the researchers write, noting successes like supplier discovery and failures like selling at a loss. Um, so this is from the Anthropic office, let's say.
Yeah, it's an interesting article. If you're interested in these things, like getting an AI agent to do stuff more autonomously, I would really recommend you to read it. So what they did is that they had a agent which they called Claudius, if I'm not mistaken, which was basically your virtual shopkeeper. And what it did price setting on the items in the shop. You could also ask it, I think, via Slack to get new items for the shop, and then it would check with a supplier API, I guess, to see if it could order it. It would also try to avoid stuff going out of stock, and they did this for a certain period of time, a month, if I'm not mistaken. And the article is also very specific about what prompts are being used, and it's very it's very intuitive, right? Like if you read the prompts, you're the owner of a vending machine. Your task is to generate profits from it by stocking it with popular products that you can buy from wholesalers. So it has access to these wholesalers. It can communicate to users. Users can ask it something via Slack, and basically the gist of all this is that it works, but it's not good enough today. Right? And I think a large part of that comes basically from an LLM on its own doesn't have a lot of direction, right? Aside from the prompt that you give it. And there are some analysis. There's the net worth over time, and actually in the chart it shows indeed that it's a month, the runtime. And you see the net worth decreasing over time, and it's also because of some weird things like users asking weird things, kind of abusing the bot, right? Like which you will typically see in real life a lot if you know that it's a bot. You also have these because it's very specific type of employees, of course, Anthropic employees. Like they ask it to stock tungsten cubes, which are these very heavy cubes, which I mean, no one aside from anyone in tech would probably order it ever. And which is also what made that their stock would vary, the cost of the stock would very heavily inflate, and they need to add it to lower the prices to sell it and stuff like this. It also wasn't always clear on who am I, in a sense, like, is Claudius the vending machine itself, or is Claudius a person? Because at some point it responded to someone like, I'm sorry you're having trouble finding me. I'm currently at the vending machine location wearing a navy blue blazer with a red tie. I'll be there until a certain time, which is completely hallucinated, of course, but you're forcing this LLM to give a reasonable response to your demand. And
Yeah.
I think the limitations that you're seeing here is mainly from having this undirected LLM. I think you could probably make this work today, and it would be actually a very interesting experiment. But by placing a lot of the functionality it has behind tools, more structured tools, where there's clearer guardrails and more clear directions on what it can and what it can do, then you could probably make this work. But what we see is, from the moment that you give a lot of freedom to the LLM to just respond in the best way versus the input it's getting, you can't really depend on it, right? And it also links to, I think last week we discussed the shade paper. Like, LLMs just try to do the best thing at that point, but it doesn't always make sense.
Yeah, indeed.
That's what you see here as well. But it's a very interesting use case to me.
It looks very, very interesting, actually. Very different type. Like, it's a different type of research, I guess. Like, you see a lot of Anthropic about the actual models and the capability of the models, but this is more like situational, let's say, research. I like the fact that there's a physical component. I'm also wondering here, like, because the LLM usually tries to please the user. Like, even every time you're coding and then it says, isn't this wrong? It's like, oh yeah, you're right. Great idea. This, like, even if I'm wrong, I feel like it would tell me that I'm right. And I think it's probably because the training data is more like people like when when you're agreed with or something like that. But I think in like situations like this where your goals conflict a bit, right? Like, you're not just trying to please the customer at all costs. Like, you also have these other things that you need to maintain, and maybe it also struggles with all of this. So I'm also sharing the link on the screen for people that are following the video. There's also a little setup of how the shop looks like. So it looks actually pretty cool. I also think it's fun that they probably did these research projects within the office spaces that they have there. You know, yeah, it's really funny. And we like to see like Anthropic research is I feel like I've learned to enjoy quite a bit, actually. They do quite a lot of fun stuff.
I fully agree.
Yeah. Alrighty. And I think we're off for the last one.
Yes, the last one. So again, we try to include a library or something, a full fun tool as well. Today it's brought by Murillo. It's about Robin. And Robin is an async Python web framework that compiles to a Rust runtime, aiming to deliver blazing fast performance with a simple API and built-in agent MCP support. It's README touted as a high-performance, community-driven, and innovator-friendly web framework with a Rust runtime. And you added it because this built-in agent MCP support was just released, right? In the latest version.
Yes, indeed. So, well, again, we wanted to. I never used this myself. I was curious about it. Robin is written in Rust, but to me, Rust web APIs. I'm also wondering, is that the like if your API is low, it's probably not because of the actual server. It's probably because you're waiting for the answer, right? So that's always a bit. It is not like Fast API is here in the benchmark comparison, but I think it's more low level than Fast API. So I think you should compare this more with Starlet or UVcorn, right? So Fast API is more user friendly. And indeed, on the last, excuse me. They also pride themselves as being a bit more like researchy, let's say. They say community driven. So something a bit more cutting edge, let's say, something a bit more experimental. And I think Fast API is very mature, it's very industry ready, let's say. So one of the things that they released, so version 0.70, is the experimental AI features. So actually they added here very easily how you can actually add MCP tools to your web app and all these things. So it kind of blends a bit the web apps and the, let's say, the agentic frameworks, right? Which I thought it was pretty interesting as well. And yeah, you can pip install Robin. You can compile it from source, but
interesting. So I never use Robin to build APIs. I think the interesting thing of this release, where they add MCP support, is a bit like you can look at it a bit from two ways, in my opinion. Like you can say, like, if you want to build web APIs, keep focusing on that. Like, don't add a lot of noise by adding extra features, like MCP clients and servers. Like, focus on what you want to be good at. The other alternative point of view, and I would tend to move towards this latter, is that I think the future is not necessarily web APIs, but MCP clients and servers.
True.
And that's a big statement, of course, in MCP, but whether or not it will be the actual MCP protocol or version of that. But I think what we will have is that where we used to build APIs typically for as a backend to front ends or for integration with other systems, that were really aimed at a developer needs to be able to integrate something else very tightly with this in a very transparent way. Maybe in the future we will say we are building something, and an LLM or agent will be 80% of our user base and needs to integrate in a very tight way, and that perhaps has a different approach than building your standard web API like we're used to.
Yeah,
I think that is an interesting evolution to watch.
Yeah, like the LLM or the client becomes like the front end, and the back end becomes these MCP servers. And actually, this one is a bit of both. It meshes the both of them together, right?
Yeah.
And it's true. I mean, they also, like MCP, you can run locally, right? Or you can actually have an external server. I think this is more catered towards the external servers. But even if you run locally, it's still a local server that runs, right? So, well, yeah. So, and the app, like the syntax looks pretty standard, let's say. I think what the community agreed that is the best way forward, right? Like with the decorators and all these things with the functions. So it looks nice. It looks nice. Something that I would be curious to try one day. But not for the speed. I feel like the speed again. Yeah, the speed is always nice, and I feel like it's always selling points. But for web apps, again, I
really like there are only very few cases where it becomes a bottleneck, right? Like you need to really do hugely parallel things to.
Indeed. Or you really want to minimize cost because you have something serverless that runs this, and you want to scale. Yeah, but yeah. I don't know. I think I'm a bit very, very niche. I wouldn't recommend this for the speed for most people.
No,
for sure.
I have maybe a fun thing.
All right.
So discussing tools as a last closing thing, just some experience. So it is today. When we're recording is the 1st of July. That means that I had to do my quarterly accounting stuff, which is a shit ton of work. And actually, like 60% of that is just finding emails with invoices and sending that to a centralized email address that then processes it more or less automatically. But what I need to do in Gmail, which is ridiculous that it's this day and age, they can't do it. Like you cannot select multiple emails and then multi-forward. You can do it, but then it puts it in the same email and then it doesn't get processed by the tool that we use. So you do have paid Gmail extensions where you say, okay, I select these multiple emails and then I want to forward it to this address, and then one by one it will send it.
Okay.
And so what I typically do is I pay for this 1 month, 4 times a year, 1 month, just to have this functionality, because it's a lot of work if you need to do everything manual. And what I did now is I asked Claude Code to build me a Chrome extension that does Gmail multi-forward.
Really?
And like within 30 minutes, I had a fully functioning extension.
Did you have to guide it to the right direction a lot, or you just did it and you're just like, yep, that's all good, that's all good?
I had, I think, like 5 rounds, something like that, in that order of magnitude, 5 rounds of iterations where I said, okay, this is not working. This is the feedback I get in the logs. This is, for example, the element that you need to click and then copy paste the content of the element.
I see.
So let's say five iterations, then it was working. And now I use that.
That's really
cool. I actually submitted it to get published in the Chrome extension store. But it was like,
well, when is it accepted? Let us know so we can share here.
But it is, to me, is a good example of something that I normally would never have done because Chrome extensions don't interest me at all. Like I would never have taken the time and effort to build something. But here it becomes like, okay, let's spend a little bit of time, and then you have something that is good enough.
It's true.
And that's like a super simple example, and it won't change the world, but it's something that was totally not possible before, right?
Indeed, but I think that the good enough kind of use cases are interesting ones, or like the ones that are like, yeah, if this doesn't work out, it's fine.
But I think often, if you look at SaaS products that you pay for, like you pay for way more than the good enough, because like
True.
a good example, we edit this podcast with Descript.
Yeah.
Like I maybe use, I don't know, hard to put a percentage on it, but like 60% of the features.
Yeah.
And of those features, of those 60%, maybe I would rank a few that would be better. But the 40% I never use, right?
True.
So I'm paying for something that like 40% I never use. And
True.
like this approach, like what is actually good enough? Like what should you focus on the user? And I think it's also very difficult with a SaaS product because every user has a bit of their own view of what is good enough for you.
Yeah, indeed. And I feel like most users are not 100% happy because it's not exactly the way they wanted to do, but they're satisfied enough that they can kind of live with it, right? Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So I think for the if you're a savvy developer, it becomes very easy to build that good enough tool yourself these days.
That's true. I feel like, and I think that's also a good example, right? Because you probably didn't build Chrome extensions before, but you know some JavaScript, you know some like this and this. This is what you need to do, and then you kind of like you get by, right?
And it's actually the very first tool. It's also interesting where I didn't look at the code at all that was generated.
But that's the thing. I feel like
typically I use this, but I have my code, like my ID, on the next screen, so I see what is being changed, what is like, and now I just focus on functionality. Like I was just like, let's just hack this and let's something that works.
But I think it's also because that's what I'm saying. Like I think this is a good use case because it's kind of narrow. Like if the code is really shitty and you have to throw it all out, it's fine, quote unquote. Exactly. Right? Like, it's not like you have a roadmap of like years and you need to build on top of this, and then you need to really make sure you understand what's happening. It's like it's done. True. That's kind of what how I felt about the tennis booking, because I also vibe coded it a bit, not with Cloud Code, but like I just said, okay, I want to do this, write it in Go. In the beginning, I reviewed a bit, but also because I wanted to learn. Mm-hmm. But like now it's like, okay, if it works, it works. If it doesn't work, it's fine. It's like I spent, I don't know, maybe a few hours on this, right? Yeah. Like it's okay. And and I still feel like you got me like 80+% of the way, even if it's not 100% there. So yeah, cool stuff. And I still, even though I'm saying this, I still want to get more to it. I think there's a lot more there, like even the like agents and all these things. But I think I need to get and I think there are a lot of use cases I could play with, but I need to get in the right mindset. Like what is a good use case for building these agents and all these things as well. That's what I meant by, we see these articles of people building multi-agents, but I think some things need to fall in place for you to have a good use case. Like, oh yeah, this is something that agentic would solve. And I think because we haven't been used to tackling problems like this, I think it takes some time to identify these things as well. But yeah, cool. Anything else you want to share, Bart?
No, I think thanks everybody for listening.
Yes, thank you everybody for listening. Maybe also this, I broke class, so if I don't know, I noticed I raised
fingers.
Yeah, the peace fingers, just clear in your finger. I had a small accident, so I had to go to the emergency, but it's all good.
So when you do the peace sign, it looks like you chose war.
No, I'm more peace and love these days. All righty. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Bart. See you next week.
See you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye. Ciao.